Hey there, Purple Marine 81 here. This is going to be the fourth installment in the videos going over the lessons that I learned living out in the woods for 35 days. If you haven't watched any of the others, I'll just briefly touch on the previous ones. The first one was over water, the second was over food, the third was over shelter, and this is going to be going over concealing movements. Something that I really wanted to try to focus on when I was doing this was uh, concealing my movements to and from, my base camp or my bug out location, whatever you want to call it, as much as possible. Because primarily the reason why I did this is because like I said, I was trying to simulate, a hit the fan situation as closely as possible. And if I would have just been roaming back and forth freely from work or wherever I was going back to the my bug out location, um, that I think that would have taken a little bit away from it. At least it would have for me. So I really try to stay very disciplined as far as doing that. And there's I'm not going to cover everything um, because there's a lot to learn about concealing your movements. Um, and the best thing for you to do, honestly, in my opinion, is go online and find like a military field manual. There's lots of them that you can download for free. And in those, they'll have a lot of different things on learning how to conceal your movements. Um, and overall, just a lot of good knowledge in there as far as like trapping for, wild game and that kind of thing, survival type information. But there's a lot of different things in there as far as like how to conceal your movement at night, during the day, when you should move, um, and what type of terrain, and so forth. But basically, what I did was I tried to really limit my movement to night for obvious reasons, because it's a lot easier to conceal yourself at night. Um, and a lot of it also is the location that you choose. Now, be it that I was in an urban setting with some rural areas, woodland areas around there, um, I had kind of had to be a little bit careful about where it was that I was entering and exiting um, the woods because there's different fields and so forth that are around it. And I didn't want anyone that would be in a house because there was quite a few times where there were people, be out doing yard work or whatever that would have been able to have seen me if I would have just came strolling right out of the woods and across this field, um, you know, pretty easily. Um, and I didn't want that. Not to mention the fact that I was on somebody else's land that I didn't have permission to. So that whole month was spent on somebody else's land, and they didn't know I was there. Um, and that was kind of the whole goal, was not to be caught, not to have my bug out location found. And I was successful in doing that because I maintained discipline when I was moving back and forth. One thing that you do have to do and keep in mind is playing with the whole hit the fan situation is if you're in a good secluded location for your bug out location or wherever it is that you happen to stop to set up some sort of base camp, and especially if you have resources that are close by that you can utilize, you really do not you want to limit your movement as much as possible, basically only doing it when it's necessary. Every time you move from your base camp, you're creating noise that's going to get you caught. You're moving around, you can be seen from somebody. You may leave some sort of trail behind where somebody can find. And if you're in that type of situation, you're going to have people that are going to be looking for resources just as much as you are. So if they stumble across something that will make them think that they can find something of yours, they're going to try to track it down. Um, and especially if they see you moving to and from, they're going to wait until, at least if they're smart, they're going to wait until they see you clearly leave, and then they're going to go back the direction that you came and try to find whatever it is that you left behind and loot whatever you've got. And in most people's situation, if they were in that type of a situation, they're not going to be carrying everything back everything on their back when they're going to get, replenish a resource like safe. It's just like water. They're not going to pack everything up and take it with them. So you're going to be leaving some gear behind, and that's just leaving it right for the picking for somebody else. So, I really try to stay disciplined about doing that. I limited my movements tonight. I was careful about where I was entering and exiting. That's something that you really have to pay attention to also. And like I said, I'm not going to go into like all the details as far as like concealing movements. That's your most dangerous point is when basically, especially in like an urban scenario, is that the exiting of let's say leaving the woodland area, moving into the urban setting, is you're coming out of that concealment, and that's when people will see you the easiest. That's when you need to pay the most attention to your movement. Not as much when you're coming in, because if somebody follows you in, it's going to be easier for you to notice someone's following you because you're going to hear them, or you're already going to be at your camp so you can defend it. But when you're leaving the area, when you're leaving that area, you need to really kind of survey the area before you leave. I always carried a pair of binoculars on me, and I would sweep the entire area for a few minutes. Just say squatted down behind some cover, checking everything out, make sure that there was nobody who was out who would be able to see me leave that area. And when it was clear for me to leave, then I would exit quickly and blend in. So that way, I would just look like somebody walking down the sidewalk. Nobody was the wiser. Which, you still have to kind of do to some degree when you're re-entering, but not quite as much. Let me see what else. I had somebody ask me a little while ago, I can't remember his full name, Bibles and Barbells. I think there's a little bit more to it, but that gentleman asked me how I was able to pull off going back and forth to work with nobody being the wiser. That was a little bit challenging sometimes. Basically, the biggest thing was maintaining hygiene. If you smelt real bad, or you had like leaves sticking out of your hair or something, then it'd be a little bit obvious that you were in the woods. So basically what I did is they already knew that I always carried a backpack to work every day, so that made it a lot easier. It was basically my go bag, or I'm sorry, not my go bag, but my EDC. And what I would do is I would take my work shirt. I would leave my work pants on because they were just black slacks. Just being careful not to get a bunch of stuff all over them when I was leaving the woods. And then I would go into work, change my shirt, and just make sure that before I did all that, that I had kind of cleaned myself up before I went into work. And they never knew any differently. The only time that it caused a problem was if they asked me to go do something afterwards with them. I would have to decline and make something up, but that wasn't that big of a deal. Yeah, it's surprising how much you can hide from people just by keeping your mouth shut. And that's all I really did, is I just didn't talk about it, acted like everything was normal, maintained the same routine, and nobody was the wiser of it. But I try to think if there was anything else that I wanted to touch on. One thing that I do want to recommend doing is when you're doing this, when you're hiking out in the end of the woods, and you're trying to remember, a way back to wherever your base camp is, you quicker than you think, you will start to wear a path in the vegetation that is very easily followed. And I'm not a big guy, so I don't have 300 pounds tromping down on the brush. But you will surprisingly quickly wear that out, especially after it rains. It basically turns it into just a barren mud path, and you don't want a very clear path running back to your base camp. So what I did was I basically I allowed myself a certain way or a certain clearly defined path through some heavy vegetation that went majority of the way towards the camp. Excuse me. And then I started practicing taking alternate routes to the last probably, I don't know, quarter or a third of the way there, where I would basically rotate out in a circle where I had, let me see, bear with me here for a second. I'm going to draw this out for you so you understand what I'm talking about. All right, sorry about that. This is kind of what I'm talking about. This arrow right here, this is the direction coming in from the urban area, going back into the woodland area. Now basically what I did is that X, that's where my base camp is, and I would rotate out to where this last path here, one day I would follow this all the way back until I got to the camp. The next day I would take the next ring in basically and keep working my way into that center part, so that way I was evenly wearing the path, so it wouldn't get trampled down, and I would just rotate that out so it wouldn't wear out as quickly. You know, and inevitably it's going to do that anyways, and hopefully by that time you can just move your base camp over to somewhere, you know, a few yards away to help, you know, start that process over. It helps conceal yourself, you know, because the area that I was at, there's a lot of hunters and stuff. You know, that's somebody who's very likely to stumble upon your trail. So you need to hide that from them as well, especially because those types of people are going to be a lot more skilled at following that trail. That's about all I got, really. If you have any questions or comments or anything, as always, feel free to leave them. And thanks for watching, guys. Purple Marine 81 out.